A couple of days ago, there were 4 or 5 billionaires who got on an airplane in I think London, England, and they flew down to Paris, France. These were a couple of billionaires that were traveling with I think they were all in their 40s and their 50s. They were all traveling with a bunch of young ladies, and they were going to have a party. They were traveling on a private jet, and while they were en route from London down to Paris, the Parisian government, whatever their version of the federal air traffic control is, reached out to them and gave them a warning and said, absolutely, under no circumstances, land that jet here in Paris. And the billionaires decided that they're going to do it anyway, and so they did not turn around like they were supposed to. They instead landed their private jet, there in Paris. Once they hit the tarmac, they were met by a whole cadre of police officers and police cars that parked themselves around the jet and didn't let the men, the billionaires, disembark from the jet. And this led to a 3-hour standoff in which the police tried to tell these guys that they absolutely have to turn the airplane around and fly back to London, and they refused and held out for 3 hours. Eventually, after about 3 hours were up, most of the guys decided that they would go back to London. One of them decided to fly to Berlin, but there was one statement or one comment that one of these billionaires made that really caught my attention when I was reading this in a news article. And that was that he said, "I have money, let's talk." And he's talking to the police officers saying, "I have money, let's talk." And the article went on to explain that the billionaires knew that they were going to have some trouble, but they had assumed that they would just be fined and then they'd be allowed to continue. And so there were several helicopters that were also waiting there at the airport to take them from the airport to some private villa somewhere. And their plan was to pay the fine there at the airport and then get in the helicopters, fly to the villa, and then stay there for the next month or two or however long this whole COVID thing goes on. And I was so impressed that the Parisian police did not let these guys do that. These guys knew it was against the rules, but I believe from what this article was saying, I can kind of draw conclusions that these guys were probably accustomed to being able to buy their way out of just about everything. And that is such an incredibly arrogant way of approaching life. If you have a lot of money, if you think you can just buy your way into or out of anything that you want to. Today, you are going to be able to do these things by the end of the lesson. Number one, you will be able to combine the concepts of hard work and thrift found in the book of Proverbs with the concepts of trusting in God to supply our needs found in the Gospels. You'll also be able to plan for the future while determining how God wants you to apply his principles concerning money. So, very overarching lesson today that deals with the use and abuse of money. Kind of an end stone, a capstone to this chapter on money. First, let's begin by reviewing. So pause the video and go to Quizlet and review the 8 and 9, the terms from chapters 8 and 9 in Quizlet, and then come back to this video. Okay, welcome back. So far in chapter 9, we have studied quite a few things. We've learned about the 3 functions of money, which are to be a medium of exchange, to be a measure of value, and to be a store of value. We've looked at the 6 characteristics of money, which are portability, durability, homogeneity, divisibility, constancy, and intrinsic valuableness. We looked at metallic money, and we learned that specie means coined metal money. We also learned that debasing means mixing base metals with precious metals when making coins and lowering the overall value of the coin. We learned that Gresham's law states that bad money drives out good money. We've learned that face value means the value that is stamped on the face of metal money. We learned that inflation, which is the increase of prices, takes place when the amount of money in circulation outpaces the amount of stuff that money can buy. And deflation, which is the decrease of prices, takes place when the amount of stuff there is to buy outpaces the amount of money in circulation. In 9.3, we learned that legal tender is any form of money that has been declared a valid means of payment. We learned that paper money was first created when goldsmith banks began issuing paper receipts to depositors, and these depositors began to use the receipts to make transactions rather than using the gold itself that was in the bank. We also learned that fractional reserve banking started when goldsmith banks kept only a fraction of the gold deposits on hand and provided loans with the rest of the deposits. And then finally in 9.3, we learned that the US government's money and the currencies of most modern governments today are called fiat money, which is legal tender that is backed by nothing but the government's promise that the money will work. In 9.4, we learned that M1 equals bills and coins plus traveler's checks plus money deposited in checking accounts. We learned that M2 equals M1 plus money in savings accounts, CDs, and other term investments that are under $100,000. For some reason, we lost our video feed for just a bit here. Let's see what's going on. Okay, sorry about that. We also learned that M3 equals M1 plus M2 plus CDs and term investments over $100,000, and also some other big money that was not really defined further, or we haven't defined further in this class. And then finally, we learned in 9.4 that credit cards can be a good idea but need to be used with caution. In 9.5, we learned that money is created by the Treasury Department here in the United States and is managed by the Fed. Which stands for the Federal Reserve. The Fed manages the amount of money in circulation in three different ways. First, it's by open market operations, which means buying and selling government securities, which is the way that they get bills and coins into circulation. They also manage the money supply through reserve ratios, which is telling banks how much money they have to keep in reserve. And the rest can then be loaned out. And then they also can control the amount of money effectively in circulation through discount rates, which is the amount that the Fed charges to commercial banks to allow them to loan money or lend money from them. Okay, today we are going to move on into the use and abuse of money. So it's a really overarching view of how to actually use money well. So Proverbs gives lots of advice about making money and working hard. For example, Proverbs 10:4 says, "Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth." Proverbs also gives a lot of advice about not being greedy. For example, Proverbs 15:27 says, "He who is greedy for gain troubles his own house, but he who hates bribes will live." Jesus taught some really radical things about money and about ownership of stuff. For example, in Matthew 6, verse 25 and then verse 33 say, "Do not worry then, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear for clothing? For the Gentiles eagerly seek all these things. For your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." In general, Proverbs talks quite a bit more about how to be prosperous, how to work hard, to be thrifty, and to not make bad loans or take out more debt than you can handle, and so on. While Jesus talks more about trusting God to supply your needs. And Christians tend to emphasize one approach more than the other. So there's kind of people who tend to talk more about what it's like to be a Proverbs believer, and while there's other people who tend to focus a lot more on what Jesus specifically said about wealth. Conservative Christians tend to emphasize the Proverbs approach more because it really aligns with conservative Christianity's values of hard work, thrift, and taking care of families, ourselves and our families. On the other hand, the teachings of Jesus are hard for a lot of conservative Christians to interpret, because what does it mean to seek first the kingdom and allowing God to supply for our needs? Like, what does that really mean in your personal life? Does that mean that you should quit your job and just study the Bible and pray all day? What does that mean for you exactly? How do you seek first the kingdom and allow God to take care of your daily needs? So these are actually some really tough questions to answer, and the answer is not the same for every Christian. So I would thought of a scene in the book A Horse and His Boy, which is part of the Chronicles of Narnia series, in which Aslan, who is the main character, the lion who represents Jesus in our world, is talking to Shasta, who is the main character in A Horse and His Boy, about the events that had taken place to Shasta over the course of the story. At one point, Shasta turns to Aslan and he asks Aslan about a key detail that had happened to a different character in the story named Aravis. And Aslan turns to Shasta and he says, Shasta, that is Aravis's story. It's not your story. I have a different path for her and it's unknown to you. And that is always a really good reminder to me whenever I read that or whenever I hear that story, that part of the story, A Horse and His Boy, because it reminds me that while God is calling all of his followers, all Christians, to follow the same principles, the way that those principles are actually lived out are going to vary from one Christian to the next. Because God, sorry, I keep losing this video feed. What is the deal? Sorry, hang on. Okay, sorry once again. So going back to this story about Shasta and his question to Aslan about Aravis. This reminds me that God does actually call us to different things. So we all are living under the same principles that God has laid out, but the way those principles are going to be lived out actually are going to vary. God will call us to different specific things. So God is quite certainly going to calls a lot of people to maybe abandon everything, sell the house, sell the car, get rid of most things that they own, and move somewhere where people need to hear the gospel for the first time. While God calls other people to actually maybe live in a place where they can be very prosperous, and God uses those people to be the bankers, right, for kingdom work. So these people can maybe make a lot of money and give a lot of money to kingdom work. So whatever God specifically has for you, God is going. The principles are the same. That God is really this overarching owner of everything, and you're just a steward. And that's the biggest thing to remember. So I want to just give you one example yet, or to talk to you finally yet about being a good steward. So here's an example. If you make an average of $50,000 for the rest of your life from age 18 until 65, and the $50,000, that actually may be a little bit low, that may be a little bit high, especially moving off into the future as inflation takes place. $50,000 is probably going to be pretty low. But let's work with that number. If you make an average of that from the time that you're 18 until you're 65, you're going to take in about $2.4 million. About $2.4 million. It's a lot of money. And what are you going to do with all of that money over your lifetime? The most important thing to remember about all that massive chunk of money that you're going to be making in your lifetime is that you are actually not the owner of that money. You don't actually own the house that you're going to be buying. You don't own the car you have right now. You don't even own the cell phone you have right now. Nothing that you have or that you're going to have is actually yours. You are simply a steward of the things that God has given to you. And so this can be a really tough thing to remember, because obviously it takes hard work on your part to actually be a good steward, right? You actually have to work hard to get out of bed in the morning, to get your, as they say, your rear end in gear, and to get stuff done, and to actually work hard, save, and make good decisions about money and economics and stuff like that. Like, you actually have to choose to do those things. And so it's really easy when you are making good choices and you are working hard to then begin thinking that it's all me. It's because of what I've done that I am and my family are in a really good position. But it's really important to remember that attitude is actually extremely arrogant, because God actually is ultimately the supplier of everything. And there are lots of people alive at this very moment who are really coming to grips with that reality. So in this area, we are not dealing much with a lot of economic fallout because of COVID-19, because it hasn't hit this area as much. There are some people who are, for sure, but it hasn't hit us as hard. But there are lots of really rich people that might be living like in New York City or New York State who are absolutely decimated, who are wealthy and are now decimated because of the effects of COVID-19. And God can give and God can take away very quickly. And so it's super important for you to remember that. No matter how successful you become in the future, your success is entirely coming from God. It's not coming from your own effort. You have a part to play in it, but it ultimately is coming from God. God gives it. You're just the steward. So I have a parable to read to you yet. This is straight from Jesus' mouth, as remembered by the disciples. So this is coming from the Gospel of, I think it's Matthew. not entirely sure. It comes from the Gospels, one of the Gospels. Again, the kingdom of heaven will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To each one he gave 5 bags of gold. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work, and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. I've added 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold, and see, I have gained 2 more. His master said, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew you are a hard man, harvesting where you do not sow, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have, will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. God's going to give you stuff over the course of your lifetime, according to your ability, as it says here in the parable. If you're highly capable, God's going to give you a lot of stuff. God has already given some of you a lot of stuff. You got a lot of talents. A lot of the stuff you have right now isn't really in monetary form, but God has given you a lot of things already, a lot of talents. And it's going to be up to you to decide what you're going to do with those things. Are you going to be like one of the first 2 guys who could come to Jesus at the end of their life and say, look, here's the stuff you gave me. You gave me a beautiful voice to sing. You gave me a clear mind to think. And I took what you gave me and I really added a lot to your kingdom, God. And God will maybe turn to you and say, fantastic. I appreciate what you did. You put in a lot of work. You took what I gave to you and you did really well. And so come enjoy come be part of my happiness. Or are you going to be like the person who comes before God and says, look, you gave me some stuff, but I buried it. I didn't really use it at all. And God's going to be pretty displeased with that if that is a decision that you make. So God is giving you a lot of stuff and you need to steward that. Okay, your assignment for today is the following. We are getting ready for a test on Friday, so heads up there. Test 4 is on Friday. It covers chapters 8 and 9. And we're going to be doing chapter reviews today and tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday. So the chapter 8 review is going to consist of the following. First, in chapter 8, the chapter 8 review, you're going to be doing the identify section, and you're going to do numbers 1 through 7. In the explain section, you're going to do number 4, number 6, and number 7. And then, number 4, number 6, number 7, and number 9, and answer all of those with 1 to 3 complete sentences. And then you're going to also, in the concept section, do number 1 and 3, and answer each of those with a paragraph consisting of 3 to 5 complete sentences. Okay, those details will also be in your assignment, so if you missed it here, you can obviously get it there. All right, Mr. Chris out. Stay safe, stay sane, stay inside. Hope to see you all quite soon.